Before Dark Souls, before Bloodborne, Fromsoftware released a horror game most people have never heard of. Kuon came out quietly in 2004, and it disappeared just as fast. Today, a complete copy can go for over $1,000. But rarity isn't the reason I'm talking about it. Kuon is slow, strange, and genuinely terrifying. So, what is this game? Kuon is set during Japan's Heian period, an era of nobles, poetry, and ritual magic. A time so far removed from modern horror that it doesn't feel historical, it feels supernatural. The game takes place in and around Fujiwara Manor, a decaying Kyoto estate tied to ancient mulberry trees planted by the Hata clan. These trees don't just bear fruit, they produce silkworms that wrap the dead in cocoon silk and bring them back to life. But resurrection has a cost. The dead need grudge, the lingering hate of the living, to survive. The ritual was meant to be completed 9 times. Once the final merging is done, something new is born, a being twisted by resentment and silence. This is the Kuon Ritual. You play as 3 different characters: Utsuki, a sheltered daughter living near one of the trees; Sakuya, a young onmyoji in training; and Seimei, a powerful mystic with secrets of her own. All of them are drawn into this place, and none of them are truly safe from it. Even their mentor, Ashiya Dōman, becomes obsessed, warping the spiritual art of onmyodo into something darker. What begins as an investigation into missing priests slowly unravels into ritual sacrifice, blood cocoons, and fate tied in silk. Kuon isn't just set in the past, it feels like the past, like something buried beneath incense smoke and ritual paper. The further you walk through it, the more it seems like you were never supposed to leave it. Ultimately, it's a survival horror game, played from a fixed camera angle in third person, with a slow default walk and an option to run, which is actually a mechanic, because running can and will draw enemies. Progress is based on finding key items and solving puzzles. Doors are locked until you find the right thing, and some of those are tied to specific characters. Like other horror games of the time, interactables are shown with glowing points of light, and the mansion structure plays mostly the same across all 3 campaigns.
It's odd for all of us to be summoned at the same time.
The combat is pretty basic. Utsuki gets a knife, Sakuya uses a fan, and Seimei has a naginata, a spear basically. There's no lock-on system, but honestly, it didn't really bother me. You just have to line yourself up before attacking. You also find spell cards that act like consumables, and I feel like this is probably one of the more unique things about the game. Some of them are ranged attacks, others summon temporary allies to help fight. There's also a whole meditation system that lets you recover health by standing still, but I didn't use it much. Healing items were frequent enough, and meditation just felt like it slowed things down even more. The thing that did wear on me a bit was melee combat. It's stiff, it's not broken, but it's not satisfying either. You start to dread encounters not because they're hard, but because they drag. That slowness does feed into the tension though, but it also makes you avoid fights entirely when you can. One of the weirdest parts is how Kuon handles the overlapping characters. You revisit the same mansion areas across all 3 stories, but the puzzles barely change. It creates this strange disconnect, like if one phase happened before the other. Why is this door still locked? Why is that item back where it was originally? And sometimes it's reversed. One character might break a floor in one story, then in the other story you find that hole already there. It creates this layered confusion where you're never quite sure if things are happening in order or even at the same time. It kind of works for the atmosphere, but it definitely threw me off some. The enemy design leans more into subtlety than jump scares. Some of the monsters are straight up weird. There's one woman whose neck stretches into a giant centipede. But the real standout moments weren't combat, they were ambient, things just barely in the corner of the screen. Something hanging from a rafter or standing motionless on a roof, asking yourself if there was even anything there. And those things don't lead to fights, they're just there to build up the atmosphere. Kuon never throws anything at you fast, it just waits. And in that stillness, it builds something heavier. Before we get into the story, I just want to say thank you. We just passed 1,000 subscribers, which is a massive milestone for the channel. Every view and comment and every share has helped us get here, and it honestly means so much to me. If you're enjoying this video and want to see more deep dives like this, consider subbing. It really does help.
Stop this! killed me that day!
Kuon is split into 3 connected chapters like I mentioned before, each told from a different perspective. The Yin Phase, the Yang Phase, and finally, the short Kuon Phase. But rather than a straightforward timeline, the game folds its events on itself. So what you see in one phase may contradict or even overwrite what you saw in another. It's a structure that keeps you off balance, exactly where a ghost story wants you to be. The first tale belongs to Utsuki, who arrives at Fujiwara Manor with her sister Kureha, looking for their father. The manor feels wrong the moment they step inside. Its darkened halls echo with noises just out of sight, and the air hangs heavy with the smell of old wood and decay. It's here that you start finding fragments of a diary, the Silkworm Journal, belonging to an unnamed girl who received a handful of silkworm eggs from a boy named Miyushimaru. At first, it reads like an innocent pet project. She hides the eggs from her family, keeps them warm, feeds them mulberry leaves, and marvels at how quickly they grow. The entries are oddly tender, but the tone shifts. Some silkworms don't move at all. Miyoshimaru assures her that they're just sleeping. They begin to spin cocoons that glitter in the sunlight. But she wakes them. They rattle. Soon the moths emerge, unable to fly. She wonders aloud, why have wings at all if you can't fly? Meanwhile, Utsuki searches for her father, but strange figures lurk in the halls. Women with hair trailing down like shadows, pale shapes crawling across ceilings. She occasionally crosses paths with a young exorcist named Sakuya. But they never stay together for long. From here, the game rewinds to tell Sakuya's side. She has entered Fujiwara Manor alongside her master, Domen, and several disciples to investigate the strange happenings. But something is wrong from the outset. The disciples begin to disappear, and Domen seems far too interested in the manor's supernatural history. As Sakuya explores, she too finds scattered writings. Some are scrolls, like one titled Exorcism, an old folktale about a ragged man who killed an immortal demon by nailing it to a wall with a spike. He left the people 3 such spikes to protect themselves should the demon return. A strange story, unless you've noticed the way certain shrines here still guard rusted spikes in places of honor. She also finds the first hints of Domen's research. His notes detail an unnatural form of magic tied to the mulberry trees at the shrine. According to him, the silkworms born from these trees are no ordinary creatures. They can bring back the dead, though they must feed from human hosts. He describes a process. A corpse is placed inside a massive cocoon and fused with other bodies. Repeat this 9 times and the person will be reborn. But buried in his notes is more unsettling admission. The spell was always meant for silkworms, not humans. Both Utsuki and Sakuya encounter 2 pale, identical girls, the Mulberry Twins, who seem to appear and vanish without warning. Sometimes they speak cryptically, sometimes they give instructions. In Kuhita's diary, you learn they told her to sleep with silkworms, inside a wicker chest to cure her rotting flesh. She woke up feeling whole again. Her earlier entries sound almost wistful, playing with Utsuki, hiding the worsening sickness, fearing her limbs would rot away. But the more she listens to the twins, the more she accepts their grotesque solutions. They tell her to seek out larger and larger creatures to merge with inside the cocoon. Months later, the truth drops in one shattering line. When I woke up inside the wicker chest, I realized it was Utsuki who pushed me off the cliff. By her final entry, she's murderous, envying Utsuki's healthy body, and claiming she will soon take it for herself.
Enter the wicker chest. If you enter a cocoon, you'll return to where you were.
The further you go, the clearer Domen's intentions become. He's not here to protect anyone. He's here to perfect the Kuon Ritual and use it for his own power. His notes grow darker, instructions of making puppets from human flesh, ideas of using the Mulberry Twins as tools, methods of controlling spirits with silk threads spun from enchanted cocoons. And the most telling confession, his real goal is not immortality, it's to defeat Abenu Seimei, a master exorcist, and his bitter rival.
I must be dreaming a long, long dream.
By the end of the Yin and Yang phases, the cost is clear. In Yin, Utsuki learns her sister Kureha has been dead since before they entered the manor. Her body now merged with Sakuya's older brother in a hideous monster. In Yang, Sakuya's fellow exorcists are all dead, picked off by the manor's horrors or used in Domen's experiments. Both women descend separately into the underground chambers, where the walls pulse with flesh and silk. Here, Utsuki learns she has already been through the cocoon 8 times. The realization drives her into a frenzy. She attacks Sakuya.
What? Don't do that! Utsuki!
The final act opens with Utsuki regaining her senses long enough to beg Sakuya to flee. Sakuya refuses. She wants to save her friend. This is when Abano Seimei arrives at the manor. Seimei confronts Domen, who gloats about wanting Seimei's body for the final cocoon. The fight is brief but decisive. Domen falls, lamenting that if only the ritual had been completed faster, his death could have been avoided. Seimei understands now. The ritual was never about the twins, never about the dead. It was about this moment defeating him. Utsuki appears, unable to control herself, and drags her father's corpse into the wicker chest, climbing in after him. The fate of the Mulberry Twins is sealed here. Sakuya burns the mulberry trees at the shrine, killing one, while Seimei drives a demon-suppressing spike through the other. The old folktale comes full circle.
I guess I'm too late.
Seimei suggests destroying the chests entirely. They have no idea what kind of creature will emerge. Sakuya stops her, insisting Utsuki has never seen the outside world. Reluctantly, she spares her. In the final moments as the credits roll, Sakuya is seen leaving Fujiwara Manor, and at her side, Utsuki, reborn from the Kuon Ritual, and the Saigai summon card, the last lingering reminder of the manor's horrors.
Enjoy this, but I have no choice. Wait, please wait! She hasn't been outside the manor. Her father tricked her, and we can't let her die. We simply have no idea what will be born from the chest. But you're so stubborn.
Kuon's atmosphere isn't just gothic, it's suffocating. From the very first step inside Fujiwara Manor, the air is stale, as if it hasn't moved in centuries. Every room is lit in muted ambers or ghostly blues, with shadows stretching across the walls. The candlelight doesn't so much illuminate as it barely pushes back the dark. The game's imagery leans heavily into its folklore roots. The mulberry trees loom like sentinels, their leaves whispering in a wind you can't feel. In underground chambers, the walls are sheathed in silk and flesh, the organic threads pulling tight as though the manor itself is breathing. Rooms are lined with wicker chests large enough to fit a person, and sometimes something inside moves. The diaries and scrolls you find don't just explain the plot, they build the air around you. The gentle, almost loving observations in the silkworm journal make the eventual horror sharper. As you picture tiny translucent bodies devouring mulberry leaves in the sunlight before you realize what they're being bred for. Kureha's diary moves from wistful affection to obsession, mirroring the manor's transformation from noble estate to grotesque cocoon. And Domen's books are clinical, detached, the kind of cold curiosity that can only belong to someone who sees people as raw material. Even the game's combat and exploration pace reinforce the mood. You move slowly, deliberately, a necessity in the manor's tight hallways, but that pace also forces you to linger in places your instincts scream to leave. Above all, Kuon's atmosphere thrives on a tension between beauty and decay. Silver-threaded cocoons glint softly in the dark while the bodies inside rot unseen. The gardens are lush, but something is feeding on more than just the soil. It's a world where life and death, rebirth and corruption are constantly tangled, and you can't always tell which side you're standing on. By the early 2000s, Fromsoftware was best known for 2 very different worlds, the gloomy first-person fantasy of Kingsfield and the cold mechanical warfare of Armored Core. Horror was uncharted territory for them, and Kuon would be one of the few times the studio stepped fully into that genre. The game was produced by Atsushi Taniguchi, whose previous credits included the whimsical adventures of Cookies and Cream and the deck-based action RPG Lost Kingdoms. Following the release of Lost Kingdoms 2 in 2003, Taniguchi and his team began work on something darker, a Heian period horror experience built for players who, as he put it, wanted a new approach to horror. It wasn't a smooth production. Taniguchi later admitted the project went through unspecified production troubles and a generally hectic schedule. Some of the most defining mechanics, like the Tempest system, which built tension through sudden environmental shifts, were late additions. They were easy enough to code, but their timing threatened to throw off the production schedule. Still, Taniguchi insisted they were worth it. Humans get unsettled when unexpected things happen, he explained, and these systems were designed to produce exactly that kind of unease. Even the character weapons were designed to be slightly off-kilter. Utsuki, the frailest character, wields a knife. Sakuya, the skilled exorcist, fights with a fan. And Seimei, reimagined her as a woman, carries a naginata. This inversion was intentional. Taniguchi wanted the weapons to contradict expectations, making them feel not very game-like, a subtle way to keep players uneasy. The choice of setting was just as deliberate. The Heian period, according to Taniguchi, was a strange time even for Japanese history, a world where strange beasts and supernatural events didn't feel out of place. Its court music, makeup, and architecture had, in his words, a certain sexiness that matched the tone he wanted. It was also perfect for layering in folklore, particularly kaiden, traditional Japanese ghost stories filled with curses, spirits, and slow-burning dread. Taniguchi took advantage of the cultural weight of numbers in Japan, too. The number 4, shi, shares pronunciation with death, and 9, ku, with agony or suffering. The title Kuon could be read as 9 malices or eternity, both thematically relevant depending on how you interpret the story's cycle of death and rebirth. Fromsoftware's limited scope at the time meant Kuon would take place in only a handful of areas, but Taniguchi embraced that constraint, structuring the game into 3 interlinked scenarios, Yin, Yang, and Kuon, each revealing different perspectives on the same events. The goal was to keep players wondering what happens next, while deepening their understanding of the story. For the game's art direction, Nozomu Iwai crafted the visual identity, while outside illustrator Kyusuke Chinai was brought in for promotional artwork and the amazing Japanese cover. Chinai's style was chosen from a pool of candidates because it conveyed both beauty and fear. Taniguchi personally contacted Chinai multiple times to secure the collaboration. The CGI cutscenes and motion capture were handled by Polyists United. And while there's no record of major technical breakdowns during production, Taniguchi later recounted some odd occurrences after the game was finished. The main graphic artist breaking a bone in a fall, a TV switching off on its own during a presentation, an unshakable feeling of weird air in the room. He laughed them off as people's imaginations, but in a game like Kuon, the story almost writes itself. Narratively, Taniguchi always intended Kuon to leave the door open for more. When asked about lingering mysteries, like whether the girl at the end was Utsuki reborn or an incarnation of the mulberry tree born via the Kuon method, he refused to answer, teasing that a sequel was on his mind. That sequel never came, but in a way, it fits the game's mood. Like the spirits it portrays, Kuon lingers, unanswered and unresolved.
And disease has spread through this place. The hungry, they roam the manor at night. Then, when I hear that song, I fear I'll be killed, or worse, abducted.
We found you.
When Kuon arrived, it didn't make the splash Fromsoftware might have hoped for. Released in Japan in April 2004 and brought west by Agetec later that year, it launched into a horror market already dominated by heavyweights like Silent Hill 4 and Resident Evil 4 looming on the horizon. The reviews were at best lukewarm. On Metacritic, Kuon landed a 57, with game rankings setting at 59%. Critics tended to agree on one thing: the game looked and felt unique. Its Heian period setting, steeped in kaiden-inspired folklore, was unlike anything else in survival horror at the time. Reviewers praised the narrative's slow-burn creepiness and the rich, strange world design. Unfortunately, the game drew far more criticism than praise. Combat was called clunky, sluggish, and dated even by 2004 standards. Puzzles leaned heavily on older genre conventions, and the controls were often cited as unresponsive. Jeremy Parrish at 1UP admired the visual design, but dismissed the mechanics as derivative. Eurogamer's Mark McCanticart felt the horror itself was too conventional, and GamePro went so far as to say the game was dragged down by problems the genre genre should have left behind years earlier. Game Informer liked the atmosphere, but faulted its slow pacing, while GameSpot's Bethany Massimilian admired the aesthetic yet found little incentive to replay it. In short, Kuon was a game that intrigued on paper, impressed in atmosphere, but stumbled in execution. It wasn't a total flop, but it also wasn't the cult darling it became today. Most players moved on quickly, and in the years that followed, Kuon quietly slipped out of the conversation. For years after its release, Kuon remained a curiosity, a Fromsoftware horror experiment that came and went with little fanfare. Outside of die-hard survival horror enthusiasts, few talked about it, and even fewer had played it. But its very obscurity became the seed for its transformation. With a limited print run in North America and Europe, and virtually no reprints, physical copies grew increasingly rare. By the mid to late 2010s, Kuon had started to gain traction among collectors. The Fromsoftware name carried new weight after the runaway success of Demon's Souls and Dark Souls, prompting retro gamers to look back at the studio's older, stranger catalog. By 2018, complete US copies of Kuon were already fetching around $300 on the secondhand market. Impressive, but nothing compared to what was coming. Around 2020, the retro game collecting scene exploded. A perfect storm of pandemic-era hobby resurgence, a speculative bubble in graded video games, and aggressive bidding on rare titles sent prices for niche horror titles into the stratosphere. Companies like Wata Games, which began professionally grading and sealing collectibles for auction houses like Heritage Auctions, became lightning rods for a surge in high-dollar sales. While debates still rage over whether this was a genuine market correction or a manufactured bubble, the end result was the same. Games once considered cult curiosities became luxury items almost overnight. In that frenzy, Kuon found itself elevated to legendary status alongside Rule of Rose and Haunting Ground, a trio that horror collectors now treat as the big three of rare PS2 survival horror. By 2021, Kuon's value had doubled or even tripled compared to just a few years earlier, with a complete in-box copy selling anywhere from $600 to $1,000, sometimes more for pristine or graded examples. Today, Kuon occupies a strange dual identity. For some, it's an atmospheric, flawed experiment in Heian-era horror. For others, it's one of the most coveted trophies in the PS2 library, a game whose rarity and mystique have eclipsed its original critical reception. In the world of horror collecting, Kuon is no longer just a game, it's an artifact.
Entering a cocoon 9 times will cure them. To help her, let her assimilate your flesh and blood.
Never.
You are the reason she is dead. Now it's your turn.
Looking back on Kuon, it's hard not to feel like we're peering into an alternate branch of Fromsoftware's history. One where the studio leaned deeper into slow burn, folkloric horror instead of forging the modern action RPG juggernauts they're known for today. It's not a perfect game, the pacing deliberate to the point of alienating some players, and the controls can test your patience, but in those silk-covered halls, in the lonely notes of the soundtrack, and the hushed cruelty of its lore, there's something undeniably special. This is a horror game that doesn't rely on constant jump scares or gore to keep you on edge. Instead, it's content to let unease seep in slowly, through the oppressive quiet, the ritualistic cruelty, and the sense that you're intruding on a world that was already rotting before you arrived. Even with its flaws, Kuon accomplishes something rare. It feels ancient, like a half-remembered nightmare whispered across centuries. The fact that it's now considered one of the crown jewels of PS2 horror collecting only adds to its aura. Its value has skyrocketed, its scarcity mythologized, and yet beneath the price tags and the collector hype, there's a genuinely interesting, ambitious work of horror. One that took risks with its setting, its protagonists, and its narrative structure. One that could only have come from a studio still experimenting with its own identity. Whether you come to Kuon as a collector, a Fromsoftware devotee, or just someone curious about obscure horror, it's worth remembering that its most valuable quality isn't the number on the auction listing. It's the way it lingers with you after the credits roll.
Killed me. Right here.
Kuon was Fromsoftware's eerie Heian-era dive into folklore horror, a flawed, beautiful experiment that left behind a haunting atmosphere, a tangled web of lore, and a legacy far rarer than anyone could have imagined. But thank you all for watching till the end, and for sticking with me to hit 1,000 subscribers. That's a huge milestone, and I couldn't have done it without you. If you enjoyed this video and want more strange, obscure, and haunting games in your feed, make sure to hit subscribe, hit that bell, and stick around for what's next. But as always, I'll see y'all later.